you all to today's webinar, which is titled Management of Behavior. And the resource person is none other than our Dr. Rubina Anand, who is here today. Behavior actually comes up in many So it is important to understand that what could be the trigger, what can we do when these kind of behaviors occur. And this webinar actually is a resultant by a request by one of you participants. A few sessions ago, आप पे से ही किसी ने बोला था कि हमको ऐसा एक webinar चाहिए जिसमें management of behavior चाहिए. So Dr. Lal very kindly agreed to do this this webinar for us, because with her rich resource of wisdom, knowledge, experience, we are going to learn a lot today. Right? So welcome, Dr. Lal.
Thank you, Shobha. Thank you so much. Okay, nice to see all of you in the morning today. It's almost afternoon, so very good afternoon for that. Behavior management has recently also been covered by another organization, so I'm sure a lot of you must have benefited from that also, and some of you may have attended that, and those who missed out that one have come to this one, so that's good. So I'll not waste any more time. I'll begin with my presentation. And maybe for some of you who are already teachers or parents who have attended many programs, this may not be something absolutely new. In fact, management of behavior is actually nothing new. It's something which all our, our parents, our grandmothers have all been, using management strategy for children. For all of us, we all remember that we were encouraged to do certain things which which our mothers liked. We were discouraged also. Maybe we got a shouting and so on and so forth that we got, and that kind of helped our parents to change our behavior in the manner they wanted us to behave. Okay, so it's something not very new. It's been there from time immemorial, but psychology has made it a science. So what we are going to look at is management of behavior, but a little bit scientifically. Okay. So, and I'm going to be focusing on children with autism and intellectual disability, because the behavior problems are much more obvious in these children. Okay. Okay. So just to make some of the parents who may be here, to make them understand that behavior is something that we just show in our environment. It's our reaction to the environment. If there is very strong light, we tend to close our eyes, or we go in the shade. That's a reaction that we are showing to the environment by doing some action. Okay, there's something that people can see, and it does not include those things which go in our mind. That is our emotion, our feelings, our thoughts, the way we reason out certain things. These are not called behavior, but these things, of course, impact behavior. We react in certain manner in the way we are feeling, and we show it to people that we are feeling happy or we are feeling sad. But people know that we are happy and sad only by the way we behave. Okay. So for the purpose of management of behavior, we will only look at behaviors that are overt. That means they are seen. Okay. Going on to the next one. In order to manage a child with autism or intellectual disability, we need to understand why is a child behaving this way. We need to understand the child's behavior. Okay, unlike other children whom we may easily understand because they are able to explain certain things, children with these disabilities sometimes are not able to. So we need to understand why a child is reacting to the environment in the manner he is doing. Okay, so we need to understand some of the problems that these children face. And most of you would know these common problems that these children face. But I'm just focusing on it because, sometimes we forget, especially if we are parents, we forget that the child actually is not able to understand what is happening around him, depending on the level of disability that he has. Maybe a high-functioning ID child, intellectually disabled child, may not be able to have so much problem. But of course, even he is not up to the mark of his age level other children, non-disabled children. So there is an inability to understand what is happening around. And if we are in that situation when we don't know what people are saying or what people are, non-verbally trying to indicate, then we behave in a manner which will not be deemed as appropriate by those people. Okay, so it happens to all of us. When we don't understand, we do certain things which were not appropriate. Okay, the same thing happens here when the child is not able to understand because there is a problem in understanding language or to use language. So the child behaves inappropriately or has some behaviors. And then there is an inability to communicate one's needs. Okay, a lot of people, a lot of young children or young adults with autism and intellectual disability are not able to talk the way we talk. So they are not able to communicate their needs in the manner that other people understand. And since this happens repeatedly, that they are not able to communicate their needs in the manner we understand, they start acting out or behaving in a manner which is inappropriate, deemed by us. Then there is frustration and anxiety which results from failure in daily life. So if you have got a severe disability, you may not be successful in doing things that is required of you. And you are repeatedly being told, oh no, this is not the way to behave. Oh no, you have done it wrong. Now you become frustrated. And many a times frustration and anxiety can also lead to a lot of behavioral issues. Then there are also problems which is specific to autism. Couple of them, a transition, like moving on from one activity to the other. If the child likes a particular activity and can do that activity well, then the child has a problem in moving on to another activity which may not be of his choice or of his liking, or he is not able to understand that he should do it. So he may just go into a behavioral issue. Okay, then there are these sensory issues which are there in children with autism. Where they have sensory overload. Some things are difficult for them to tolerate, some things they are not able to feel. So these sensory issues also cause them to react in a manner which is deemed to be inappropriate by most of us. And then of course, which is also true for children with intellectual disability as well as autism, is unrealistic expectation from the environment. If the child is not able to function in a particular manner because of his disability or his level of functioning, but we expect him to behave in a particular manner as per our standard, then the child may actually indulge in a behavior problem. So we need to look at our expectations also. Then there are factors that we must keep in mind which affect behavior. This is true for all of us. There are certain things which affect our behavior. One thing which is important to understand that most behaviors are learned behaviors. Most of them are learned behaviors. I'm not talking of abilities that we are born with. I'm talking of the behaviors, how we learn to interact in the environment. These are learned. And this learning actually depends on, from the time the child is born, from then onward, this learning depends on positive consequence that the child receives or baby receives from the mother. The child makes some noise like cooing or maybe just a la 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 ba ba ba, and the mother actually reinforces that. The mother gives a very positive consequence. The child feels like doing that behavior more often. Okay. Then there can also be, as the child starts growing a little more and is crawling around and goes and touches something which is dangerous, the mother gives a negative consequence. She doesn't go and hit him and anything, but she actually makes him feel that it is not appropriate, or he actually goes and hurts himself there, okay, by touching something. And so that's a negative consequence. Maybe the child will learn not to go near that. Similarly, the third reaction that we get is no response. Now, all of us know that if we were to go to someone's house and knock at the door, and we knock once, we knock twice, knock 3 times, 4 times, when we get no response, we stop knocking. We kind of know that there is nobody at home. But our knocking behavior actually stops them. So behaviors are dependent on these 3 different aspects, these factors.
Ma'am, just one moment. There is a presentation to share because
I'm sharing it. Can't you all see it?
No, I can't see it. Wilfred, can you see it? Maybe it's something wrong with my system. Wilfred, can you see it?
Can you all see it?
Can you all see the presentation, anybody?
No, ma'am. I can't see
Yeah,
it.
so just share it, ma'am.
I shared it. Okay, I'll just go back quickly and share it from the beginning.
Ma'am, now we can see it.
Yeah, now it's clear.
Okay, I'll just go back to the previous ones because I've talked about these things.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Can I just give you some time to go through it, all of you?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm so sorry about it.
No problem. Next slide, ma'am. I think
I
everybody is
think
listening.
yes. Okay. Right?
Yes.
This is what I've already explained. Inability to understand.
Understand. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This transition, there are sensory issues and unrealistic expectations.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Positive consequence, negative consequence, and no response.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now we need to understand why a child, a particular behavior, what does it get for the child? You know, all our behaviors get us something. You know, it is meant for something. If you're feeling hot, we will go and put on the fan because the fan creates air and we stop feeling hot. So every behavior has a function. So if we understand why a behavior is happening, we would be able to find ways to change it. Especially if these are behaviors that we don't want child to indulge in. So what we can do here is to identify what happens in the environment. Because remember, I said that behavior is our reaction to the environment. So what happens in the environment when the behavior occurs? We can do this by observing what happens before a behavior occurs. Okay, that is called antecedent in behavioral science. What happens before a behavior occurs, and we know how much that influences us. If it is going to, if the sky is cloudy, we immediately go and take our umbrella because we know it may just rain. So taking the umbrella is a reaction to the antecedent of cloudy sky. Okay, what happens before the behavior occurs? Now, behavior is the kind of action the child does. And what happens after the behavior occurs is the consequence that we give to the child. Now, all these are some things which actually impact our behavior. Now, functions of the behavior is getting something that is tangible. That means a child may get something that he wants, maybe a food item, maybe a game item, maybe an activity that he wants to do, maybe he wants to go down, he throws a pattern of behavior, he has a pattern of behavior and he does that. Then there are these sensory experiences that the child may get. He likes smelling something, he may just go on wanting to smell that. He may just want to avoid certain things, so he actually does some other thing. Sometimes, very often, in case of children with autism as well as children with intellectual disability, behavior actually, the main function becomes attention. Okay, so getting something could also be without actually talking about it and doing some certain action with the mother or the people around and feel, okay, the child wants food now, or the child wants to go out now, or the child wants to have certain item that he wants to keep in his hand to feel, and so on. Other thing is to escape something. That is, we also do that. If it is something which is unpleasant happening in the room, we want to go away from there. So going out is our behavior for escaping that unpleasant thing. Similarly, for children with autism and ID, escaping something could be very, very lengthy task, a task which requires several steps, and the child is unable to do that. Okay, cannot have the attention span for doing that task, so the child escapes it. It could also be the task is above the level of the child's functioning, so the child is unable to actually do that task and wants to show a tantrum or whatever, so that the child the task is removed from there. Then there is unpleasant sensory experience, which is very, very common in autism. When they don't want certain things, they actually throw a tantrum. If the child actually has a problem with noise and closes his ears, rocks very strongly, and the mother knows that the noise has to stop or the child has to move from there. So there is escape which is shown through escape behavior, which is shown through that. Also, sometimes escape social interaction, not want to talk to somebody, not want to do an activity which is to do with somebody else, and throw a behavior problem. So these are the two major functions which children have in order to do certain things. Now, if you need to change a behavior, remember all behaviors need not be changed. A behavior has to be injurious to the child if you want to change it. Okay? Or it is injurious to the environment, then you think of changing it. Or if it prevents the child from learning something new, then you want to change it. Otherwise, I would not recommend that you start thinking of changing every behavior just because you feel the child must act in this manner. Okay, so that's very, very important for us to remember this, that only in 3 circumstances that you need to change the behavior: injurious to the child, injurious to the environment, and preventing the child from learning something new. Okay, some of the common behavior issues in children with autism and ID are these. I'm sure you as parents, you as teachers, you are people who are caregivers would be able to add many more. I've just put few here. A very common one is not listening to what people are saying, ignoring requests, not responding appropriately, behaving in socially inappropriate ways. We have many times parents coming and saying, oh, my child takes off his clothes in front of people. Oh, my child goes to somebody's house, starts touching everything, or eats away everything that is served. So socially inappropriate ways. Then there is showing of aggression, tantrum, which happens very commonly. Then hurting self or hurting other people. Self-stimulation, doing similar activities, rocking, jumping, stereotypical actions. These are also behaviors which are stigmatizing to the child and gets a lot of attention from people around. And so parents want to actually do something about it. Then there is hyperactivity. I've used the word a very generic term. Hyperactivity is a very generic term. If I were to actually use it for one particular child, I will not use the word hyperactivity because we do not know what is the level of activity which makes it hyper. It depends on the situation. But there is a complaint about many of such children that they are more active than required. Okay. How do you manage behaviors? There are certain things that we need to keep in mind when you try to manage behavior. The first thing, I said in the beginning that you need to be a little scientific in your approach. You need to be actually doing certain things a little more systematically. Especially, I'm saying this for parents who are managing such children at home, that you can't just do certain things offhand. Okay, aaj mere bacche ka ye problem hai, chalo aaj main start karti hu kuch karna. I think it's important for you to observe. When I said earlier about antecedent or what happens before, so unless you observe what happens before and what happens afterwards, the behavior, once the behavior has happened, you will not be able to do anything. So observation of this is important. So you observe and determine the function of a behavior. Is the child by doing this wanting something, or is the child actually getting away from something? What is the function of this behavior? Is the behavior is a means to get something or get away from something? In some cases, a repetitive behavior or a stereotypical behavior sometimes could be a way, especially in autism, it could be a way to calm oneself. Okay. Now, this is something that I have also seen in all of us. We sometimes do repetitive behaviors, like, walking up and down when we are waiting for someone. We start tapping our finger on the table if we are waiting for a clerk to respond to us. So a repetitive behavior is basically we are anxious, we want response from the environment, and we start doing repetitive behavior. Now, these things are very commonly seen in children with disability. So many of them do repetitive behavior. So, but you need to understand why a repetitive behavior is happening. Is it happening because the child actually wants to convey something to you? Or is it happening because the child is upset and wants to calm himself down? Okay. Now, observation is also helpful in identifying how often and for how long a behavior will occur. Okay. So when you observe, you will see if there is a tantrum, how long is the child crying if there was nobody to intervene? Or if there's certain things that the child is throwing around, how long or how often it is happening for you to, if the child is just throwing once or twice, I don't think there's a need to intervene there. Okay, so intervene only when it is essential. You will be able to decide this only when you observe. Make a list of behavior that you want changed. Okay, So you, as parents, as teachers or as caregivers, you may have many behaviors that you want the child to learn, new behaviors or problem behavior that you want to change. Now, I would never recommend that you start all of them together. You need to make the most important ones, the list of most important ones, and in that, also make a priority which one you'll begin with. Okay, so prioritize that list. Now, I have already spoken about antecedent as something that starts a behavior. These are triggers. They start a behavior. So if you've identified what triggers your child's behavior, find out how you can change the environment so the trigger is removed. So if you already know that a child cannot tolerate noise, then it's very important for you to not to expose him to extreme noise or to a level of noise which the child can't tolerate. So you need to understand that, and you can preempt a behavior problem from occurring. An unwanted behavior must be replaced by an alternative acceptable behavior. So when we say, don't do this, stop rocking, what are we going to tell the child to do? If we do not give an alternative behavior, then the child will continue doing that. And you will continue just intervening by verbally saying, don't do this and don't do that. I think it's very important that we must teach them something else to do. So introduce new behavior by breaking the task into a small step. You can't just say, come on now, stop rocking, come and help me in the kitchen. It cannot be that way. You need to then think what he can do and break that task into tiny steps so that he is able to do at least one step at a time. So encourage and reinforce the child as he tries to do a new task or one step of the task, the first step. Reinforcement is something that we often forget because we feel if the child is doing something that we want him to do, there is no need to say, oh, very good and all that. We need to intervene only when he doesn't do certain things. So I think it's important actually to intervene when he's doing things which are right. So keep reinforcing and encouraging the child. Use prompts. You all know about prompts. There are prompts which, there are verbal prompts that you repeat an instruction or give some kind of cue. You can also do a gestural prompt by which you actually demonstrate an action or show an action which a child has to do. Or you can give a physical prompt by actually physically helping the child to do the task, keeping hand over hand and so on. So a good strategy in teaching new behavior is to break the task into several steps. Over the years that I've talked about behavior management, I would like to actually focus less on the problem behavior and more on skill behaviors. What happens actually that a lot of people actually focus on the problem behavior, forgetting that these problem behaviors are actually happening because skill behaviors like communication, skill behaviors like doing certain activity or playing positively or interactively is not happening. So instead of that, the child is actually doing a behavior which is not appropriate. So keep on teaching the skill behaviors and keep encouraging the child. That is extremely important. And always when you teach new behavior, break it into several steps. And if possible, start from the last step. Because when you start from the last, suppose you are teaching the child to put on his own shirt. Okay. I would say that you put the shirt right up to the chest level and let the child pull it down. Because when you do the last step first, help the child to pull it down, you are able to then immediately reinforce it. Okay, so start from the last step and move on to the first step. Not all tasks can be done from the last to the first. Some tasks need to be done from first to the last. But if you take those tasks which start from the last to the first, that will be easier for you to do. I'm just saying this to the parents who are here. Okay. While selecting a reward, make sure that it is something that the child really likes. It cannot be something that you have available or you think the child must have. If you feel the child should have some apple because it's good for him, that may not work as a reward for the child because he may not like apple, okay, or not as much as he might like a banana or something else, or maybe a piece of biscuit or whatever. So you need to keep into account that the reward is for helping him understand that he's been good just now. So you must give him something that he likes. It could be also an activity, but remember also the reward has to be in ratio to the task performed. If the task requires 5 steps and the child has learned to do or doing with prompt the first step, the reward cannot be, suppose you realize the child likes biscuit or group of biscuit or whatever, then it cannot be that one full biscuit can be given for that one small step that the child does. What you need to do is to maybe break that biscuit into several small pieces and just give one piece at a time. So that's very important, that reward is in ratio to the task performed. And also it will increase the value of your reward because the child will keep on wanting it. If you keep feeding the entire biscuit, the child may become tired of that and it may not work as a reward anymore. So that's important for you to remember. Or any other activity for that matter. I'm just talking of food reward is coming easily for me, but you can think of other activities also. Whatever it may be, suppose the child likes to roll car as a reward. You cannot allow the child to keep on rolling car for 5 minutes for a small task. It has to be just one roll and taken away. And then again, the work starts. That's how it has to be in ratio. So it must be continued. Rewards must be continued till all steps of the task are learned. So don't give up rewarding. Don't feel that the child now must do it. Otherwise, I've heard this from many, many parents and many teachers as well who say that rewarding will make him get into a wrong habit of seeking reward. I think all of us want reward for the work that we do. And children are no different, especially children with disability who actually do not understand the value of what they're supposed to be learning. So they need to be rewarded. They will be learning the task, but they're doing it for getting that reward. Please don't be, depriving them of that. So, and also remember, even when the task is learned, you fade the rewards very slowly. Don't fade immediately. To start working on a behavior when you have energy, that's important for you. Don't do it at the end of the day or when you finish your sweeping, swapping and cooking your food and all of that. Say, chalo, ab main shuru karti hu bacche ke saath. That is not the time for you because you are absolutely tired and behavior management requires patience. You will not have patience because you are tired. So don't take it up at that time. Take it up when you are a little fresh. Okay, so exhaustion doesn't work out at all like a behavior therapist. I would never advise you to do that. And then you will meet with no success and you will say, oh, whatever was told to me doesn't work for my child, so I need not follow it. That's something that is a negative thing that we always feel that if it doesn't work with me, with my child, then it is not good for me. But actually the whole thing is that we have not tried it enough in the manner it should be tried. The response to a challenging behavior or a problem behavior must be uniform and consistent. See, it cannot be, I'm feeling happy, I will let him do his rocking. Tomorrow when I feel, no, he mustn't rock, then I will start using my behavior management strategy. You need to be consistent, uniform and consistent, because the child will never realize that he has to stop if every time you give a different response. Okay, and this is important. That is why you need to share your plan of action. Suppose you have thought that when he starts showing tantrum, and I've realized that he shows tantrum because he wants attention, then we are not going to give him attention that way. Not with tantrum. We decided that we will give him attention when he stops crying, and I will immediately go to him and I'll do something, I'll play with him or, comfort him or whatever, but not while he's crying. If that is your plan of action that you have made, then you ensure that everyone at home is also aware of it. Because otherwise, other people in your house, your other child or your husband or your in-laws start giving him attention when he should not be. So then the child realizes that somebody or the other is actually coming to, give attention to me. So I'll continue with this, even if my mother doesn't. So that is an important aspect that you need to keep in mind. Okay, I've just given some example of behaviors that I keep getting, from people to tell. They keep telling me, "Oh, bacha head banging bahut karta hai." Now, what I've tried to do here is just show you how systematically you have to go. So I've put it into steps. So if you look at head banging, which is very common with children who have severe intellectual disability or have got autism, so it's a very common behavior. So the first step that you need to do is, of course, observe the triggers. What causes a child to headbang? And when headbanging happens, what do you do? Okay, so note down what happens just before headbanging and what is the response that you or other people in the environment give to the child when he headbangs. Now the second is, so you note that and you do it for some time. You just don't do it one fine morning and I'm just noting it. You need to do it for 3-4 days at least. What happens and what happens, what is the consequence that is given. That is very important. If you want to do management of behavior a little systematically, you need to observe a little more systematically too. The second step here would be to determine the function. Why is he headbanging? Now, I'm just giving you some generic functions. Could be for your child, it could be different because I do not know your child. I'm giving you some generic reasons for a particular behavior to happen. So it could be, head banging could be an attempt to communicate. The child doesn't have a means to communicate, so he's head banging, because when he head bangs, everybody at home comes to him and asks him something. Okay, so they do something so that he stops head banging. So there's a need to communicate. That's a means of communication. Then there could also be a need for attention. In the lockdown period right now, people get busy with their father is on his work from home, mother is in the kitchen, sibling is also learning online. Nobody actually gives attention to the child. So it is possible. Now, head banging is such a behavior that attention is bound to happen. Okay, so then you start head banging. In case of autism, it could also be a sensory overload. In case there are certain sensory inputs which are coming, the child can't tolerate, and the child actually headbangs, because headbanging creates another kind of pain or another sensory feeling, which actually overcomes the overload which is happening from auditory senses, let's say. Okay, or it could also be a deficit. The child is actually not able to get enough sensory input, so he headbangs, so the pain which emanates from there actually completes his need for sensory input. So it could be both. Or it could just be very simply pain somewhere else, and because the child is not able to communicate, the child is headbanging. Okay. See, like I've just put 4 things, could also be many other reasons why a child headbangs. Okay, for specific children, it could be different reasons also. Now, the third step that you might take is when you have, once you know what the triggers are, then what is the function that we can use this information to make changes. When you start time for you to make change. Now, if it was communication, you need to actually, now, like I said, I want to focus on skill behavior always. Not to focus on problem behaviors, but the skill behavior, which the lack of which actually causes a problem behavior. So if it was communication or the lack of it, then use of some other means of communication, alternative communication, would be very, very helpful. Okay, so manual signs, if possible, for children with intellectual disability, manual signs are quite easily possible. And picture cards or just color cards. And picture cards are cards which have got a simple picture over it, and the child can be taught to, suppose the child wants water or wants food or wants to sleep, there could be 2-3 picture cards that can be introduced to the child, and the child needs to learn to show it. Now that whole process will have to be broken and taught. So even when the child is going to bed without headbanging, you can still show him the card of going to bed, and the child holds it and you say, look, you're going to bed, and the child learns every time that certain things are there. Wants food, you have the food card. See, you're having food. The child learns that this is the card which shows that I'm having food. And the child will have to learn to use it for other things also. Even when initially you might want to help him, prompt him to use the card, still reward him for using it. Okay, so he gets to have a means of communication which is an alternative communication. This is in case the child yet has not developed proper communication, verbal communication the way we have. In some children, it develops slowly. In some children, it may not develop. And in case it doesn't develop, you have the alternative means of communication ready with you. So the child learns to use that instead of, and it's always better to use it. The child finds it with experience that when I show this, something happens without me going and banging my head on the wall. So obviously that process of banging head is more cumbersome and painful, and using a picture produces the same result. Okay, so that's what. Attention, head banging, I would say, should not be ignored. So when you say, then how do I not give attention? So it is advisable to stand behind. Attention in this case, no eye contact, not looking at the child at all. See, when you try to control behavior or manage behavior, you actually dislike a particular behavior, not the child. So remember that it's not the child who needs to be ignored, it's the behavior that has to be ignored. So in this case, I would say that you do a physical stop the child physically from banging head, standing behind the child. Okay, once the child with your physical aid stops it, you should be able to say immediately, very good, you're not banging your head. Okay, ignore the behavior, not the child, like I said. Okay, so do that, reward and hold the child for some time. The moment he starts banging again, preempt it and immediately hold him back and say, good, you're not banging your head. So the child gets to know that when he's not banging the head, you are actually with him, giving him attention, and you are reinforcing him. Sensory issues, in case of overload, keeping the child from that trigger of overload would help definitely. It's common knowledge. Use of earmuffs, rocking chair for those children who require vestibular stimulation, swing. I'm thinking of these things which can be available at home, because other things which are there in SI clinics may not be available with you unless some parents have already bought a small jumperoo and things like that. But these activities actually help in vestibular stimulation. Pain, if there is pain, find out if this child has stomach pain or has got some bruise or injury somewhere. So if possible, call up a medical professional, find out who knows your child and ask what you can do. So that is one thing that you can do for head banging. Another thing that I've also taken is refusal and non-cooperative behavior. Something that the parents often say, that my child doesn't listen to me, doesn't cooperate, doesn't do things and things like that. So like non-complying with instruction, unwillingness to share, unwillingness to take turn, etc. These are the behaviors. These are more social in nature. Okay. So step one here, again, triggers for non-cooperative behaviors could be that when instructions that you are giving to the child are complicated and the child is unable to really process or think in his mind what is being said. Okay. And because we have so much facility of language, we just don't even stop. We give one instruction and the other instruction and so on. So when instructions require the child to do tasks for which the child does not have the skill, like I've already said that you don't give tasks which a child can't do. You have to keep his functioning level in mind. So if you do certain tasks which the child can't do, he will definitely not want to cooperate. When the instructions are vague and the child is not clear what is required to be done. Okay, now many a times we do that. Go put your books away, put your toys away. Now what is put your toys away? Many children do not understand vague instruction. Or put this there. Now there is where need to be actually pointing out, saying on the table, on the shelf, on the chair, on the bed, where. So the child is not able to cooperate because he's not clear what is being said. You need to be clear. Sensory issues are also things, if the child actually knows that this is going to cause him a lot of pain sensorily, then the child doesn't want to cooperate. Okay. Need to maintain sameness. This happens a lot with autism, that they want to have the same thing that they want to do and they don't want to cooperate with anything or move on to another activity. Okay, and they are non-cooperative then. So, okay, so what strategy you can select? You can give effective instruction, get the child's attention. Do not just give instruction from another room or another part of the room to the child. Go near the child, get the child, maybe just lift his head so that you get his attention. Get the child's attention, make it clear what you want the child to do. Okay. Ensure that the task is doable for the child. Give positive instruction, like, something like throw the ball to your sister. Instead of saying, oh, don't keep the ball in your hand. What you want him to actually is throwing the ball, but you're saying don't keep the ball. So then the child doesn't understand all of that. You can also use a lot of pictures and visuals. This is especially helpful for those children who don't want to move on to another activity or who do not know what's going to happen, who have a problem with understanding or predicting what's going to happen next. Okay, so visual schedule or pictures are very, very helpful there. And like, if you have brushed your teeth, go to dining table and sit for breakfast. So you have food there in the picture. You have some activity after that. So one activity is done, next activity, and so on. So picture also helps the child understand what is told verbally. So use of pictures and schedules are very, very nice things to do. Offer choice. You need to offer choice to children. Okay, many a times we just tell them what we want them to do, but without any choice. Because if you give them choice, the child learns to cooperate because he can then select his preferred item. So ensure, but then don't give too much of choice because that creates confusion. Okay, so then just about 2-3 items to choose from. Like if it is meal time, like would you like idli or roti, or would you like roti or rice or whatever, and give both in front of the child and you decide which one the child selects. And don't start then saying no, you must have chawal first and then roti. Nothing like that. Whatever he takes, you start with that. What he learns then, that he has a control over his life, and you also know that he's cooperating with you. Step 3 here would be using prompting appropriately to build the skills. Give instruction, that is, Arun, put your plate on the table. You give some time to the child to process what is being said. Okay, don't intervene immediately. But suppose he does put the plate on the table, reward him immediately. Then if it doesn't happen, the child doesn't do the task, repeat instruction while pointing to the plate and directing it to the table. So you're using a visual prompt there by just pointing to things. Okay. So give 5 seconds again to process. But in case that doesn't happen, then you need to use a physical prompt by letting him hold the plate with your support, and then you move him to the table. And remember, even when that happens and the child does it entirely with your support, don't forget to reward. You have to remember to reward him. And always use whatever reward you have planned for him with a social praise, always. Okay, so what are these few things that I have said already? There's one thing that I have not said, which is time management. Okay, and okay. So these are the 5 things. If you remember in your mind, perhaps you will have a good mantra for positive behavior support. Okay, I'm not talking of behavior problem management. I'm talking of positive behavior. That means I'm talking of skill behavior to be built up. Time management is one thing. Now, a lot of children actually have no sense of time. So when you say, oh, only for 5 minutes, they don't understand anything. And you come back after 5 minutes, the child doesn't want to let go of that activity. It goes on and on. I think it's very important when you work with a child, or you are working on your own and the child is just there with you, just looking at what you're doing, that you actually start doing this time management for yourself and for the child by using a sand clock, an hourglass. You've seen that hourglass. Okay, you also get in many of the toys, you get those, which are a tiny hourglass, which has maybe a few minutes worth of sand there. It's a good thing actually, because the child can physically see the sand running out, and the moment the sand runs out completely, oh, time up. So that way you can teach time management by using the hourglass. Okay. You have to use reward. I have already told you several times. I've told you also about providing choice, and I've told you distract bad behavior. But when the child is doing that, you need to actually replace it with a behavior that the child can do. Even if the child is doing certain, suppose the child is banging head, and you know that something else, if it plays at that time, a music, maybe a TV, maybe something, maybe a song that you can sing, and the child may just stop doing that. You need to do this, or maybe just take a child by his hand and go out for a little while, out of the door, maybe down to your lobby or something, and bringing up. So distract bad behavior, and without saying that, no, you can't do head banging, I'm taking you out. Instead of that, you just do this. By the time you come back, perhaps the child will have forgotten to head bang. Okay. Also, in sensory overload, sometimes it is best to find a quiet place for the child to sit. And you need to encourage that thing for the child, that you himself starts learning to go to that place to keep himself calm. Remember, with autism, this is very humane to understand that these are genuine problems that the children have. And for everything, we cannot have a change of behavior. We need to actually also teach the child to cope up with that problem that he's facing. So finding a quiet place will also be worthwhile. Many of you may be working with adults, and I would only say a few things for adults or older children, that you respect that their age is such that they cannot do things which you always expect them to do. There has to be respect for them. There has to be some tolerance from your side. You remember that they are adults, so they require dignity. You need to give them that dignity in the management of behavior also. Certain things in their own room, if they are sleeping in a certain manner or touching themselves, just let that be. Every problem cannot be there, should not be there for changing. Like I've said, if it's not injurious to the child, not injurious to anybody, not injurious to the environment, just let it be. Okay. Remember that you need to be optimistic about change in behavior. It will happen if you state systematically. There would be growth in skill behavior. And you need to be fair. Things that you have taught your other children, this child also requires it. Okay, except that he requires it in a different manner. The method is little different, but it's the same fairness that you must show your other children. Okay, so these are the things that you need to remember. Remember also that at no point you should do anything that will harm the child. Okay, behavior management principles can easily be used for teaching wrong behaviors. You can encourage or reinforce wrong behaviors also. So remember that you must not do things like go and hit that one, go throw it away, and things like that, which are actually harmful things. We should not be doing anything which are harmful. Interfere as little as possible. Like I've said already, only do management when there is a need for it. be clear about goals and your method. You need to be systematic. You need to be scientific about your method. Monitor your progress. It is very easy for sometimes people to say, see, a behavior which is very ingrained in the child doesn't go away quickly. But if you were to monitor how often it was happening earlier, and after 10 days or 15 days of systematic intervention, the way you have planned it, has this come back? You may still find the behavior is occurring, but if it was happening 15 times earlier and it has come down to 8 times now, that's progress. So you need to, unless you were to write it down, unless you were to, monitor it, you would not know that you are in the right track. Okay. And don't forget yourself. All of us need reward. You need to reward yourself also. You need to maybe do certain things which make you feel happy. Okay. Just go on Amazon and just order some nice things for yourself. So there are ways and means that we reward ourselves. This is very limited right now, of course, in the lockdown. There are few things that we can do. We can't go and see a movie and all that. But then there is Netflix and then there is Amazon and all that. And we can take an afternoon off and just enjoy ourselves doing that. So that's very important. Yeah, Shobha, I think about kind of finished. I can take questions if there are.
Yes, there is one question which is on behavior, which would probably challenge a belief more than a behavior question, but I'll ask it. There is one parent who's asked that in full moon days, right, my daughter seems to have more behaviors than normal. Is this true? And, she's unable to do her activities completely. So what are your thoughts on it?
See, I'm not a geophysicist, definitely not. I have no knowledge of astral sciences, but I do know that, sun shining brightly has a thing on our mood. And there are things which a full moon has an impact on water, that there is sea also becomes very, very rowdy, rough sea during full moon. Maybe there's some impact on human beings also. For some people, it's very calming. Maybe for some people, it is not. But I cannot really, there's no scientific evidence which says that, astral bodies have impact on our behaviors. It's a lot more that, what we have read that makes us feel that, oh, there is a change in behavior. But this behavior could also be occurring on times when there are no full moons. I think it's important for us to note down how often this behavior occurs when there is no full moon. And if there is really, this behavior has occurred more during that time. So unless you know how many times it was occurring that time without full moon, you cannot really say it's happening more now. So I would want that mother to really note down if that behavior was occurring, how often or for how long, and was there a difference in the occurrence or the duration during full moon. And only then we can look at intervention.
Next question, ma'am. How can a spitting behavior be controlled for a child whose antecedent is when given any instructions to be followed? So I'm presuming that the child is given instruction and then the spitting behavior.
Yeah, obviously the child is given instruction, but it could also be that instruction is verbal. Maybe you need to pair it with something which is a picture form or real object or whatever. Initially, maybe this behavior is happening now for so long, it is ingrained. The moment you say something, the child spits, it's like his conditioning. So I would say that when you show something the child has to do, which he can do, is able to do, and pair it with a picture, and then physically guide him to do that, ignoring that spitting. Okay, and let him finish that thing, whatever you've asked him to do, and say, very good. Ignore the spitting part of it. I think the child will realize that you are actually rewarding him for the work that he has done for you. So if the spitting behavior is very ingrained, it will not go away immediately. But you can begin by having pictorial cards with you. You can begin by having prompts, use prompts with the child, and also note down the reaction of the child when these things happen, when he gets a reward for having done what he did. Okay?
Yes, ma'am. Next question. Some children are very good with people other than the parents. This is consistently seen since the past few years. Parents are really trying a lot. So what can be done to change this? I think parents are lucky then if somebody else is working with their child.
The thing is that person may not be available all the time with all the difficult work that parents do. If that person is not there, maybe that's the reason. That other person is maybe just having a fun time with the child likes it. Okay? So what the parent needs to do also to have some amount of that fun time with the child, and also cut down on the demands on the child, which parents make a lot of time. I think what I said about respect and dignity is very important. just we have to let the children be sometime. Let them be human beings first before you start making them a completely normal person. The need for them to change their behavior to behave like any other child is so strong in us that we forget the child's problem.
Okay.
So that's very important for the parents to really understand the child and let go certain times to let him also take decision about certain things.
Okay, ma'am. Another question. Older son of mine does not sleep most of the nights. What do I do?
I would begin by asking how long does he sleep in the afternoons? Because when he obviously doesn't sleep in the night, he's making up for it during the daytime. So you need to first observe how long is he sleeping during daytime, and then try to curtail that with some activity so that he gets to sleep maybe an hour or two in the daytime, and then maybe put him to bed a little later in the night. Try doing that first, because in most children who see children with autism are light sleepers, some of them. Okay, they can wake up very quickly and then they stay awake. And that is a big problem to the parents, especially if the child is small, younger. That happens very, very commonly. As they become a little older, some of them settle down, some of them don't. But when this happens, I think it's important for us to also ensure that they don't sleep during daytime. Okay, they have enough activity to do some physical activity which strains them out, and then try to put them to bed. Okay? And even if the child can sleep for 5 hours or so, I don't think you need to worry so much. Also, there's another worry. What will the child do if he goes around roaming around in the house? If you make sure that there are no things which are injurious to the child, if you have slept for 5 hours and last 2 hours, maybe 4 o'clock in the morning, he woke up and is moving around, I think just let it be. So begin by targeting 4 to 5 hours of night sleep by reducing the day sleep, because the child tends to sleep and the mother is so tired because she's been awake the night. She says, "Abhi sone do, mujhe dusra kaam karna hai." Okay, so we allow that to happen. We reinforce. We've seen some children in our old center where mothers have done that, and the problem is now becomes so bad that it's absolutely unmanageable. The child is awake whole night and whole day he's sleeping. So that's something that we should not allow. We should not let that happen. It requires some intervention, a strong and systematic intervention in the earlier stage, but then it settles down. And also remember that everybody is not a sleeper for 8 hours or 9 hours. Maybe this child is not. Okay, so even if you can pack in about 5 hours in the night and 1 hour in the daytime, I think if that's his requirement, let it be.
Next question, ma'am. My child is learning his siblings' behavior. So what can I do?
What is the siblings' behavior?
We don't know whether it's good behavior, bad behavior, but he's continuously learning the siblings' behavior. So
unless, see, children learn from each other. So if you feel the sibling is not doing something appropriate, then it's easier to change the sibling's behavior. Don't you think so?
Yes.
Siblings, unless the behavior is not appropriate, why would you want to change it? If the sibling is eating food by himself and the child learns to do that, is good. So I'm not very clear if it is a problem behavior there.
Yes, I think it's something positive, because the sibling can be probably,
can be used as a peer tutor there.
Yes, I think it's a wonderful. It can be made into something positive.
Absolutely.
Right. My son does not want to wear a face mask. Actually, this was covered in the last session. So
yeah, but Shobha, what happens is that a lot of people are not common people who have come to this one also.
Right.
So if you want to share it, what you said, it will be nice. Instead of me telling
it was a long presentation actually, but I'll try and make it as short as possible. You can start with using, a cloth which the child can tolerate. Maybe a mask can be made with a handkerchief which the child uses to wipe his face. Start with that, and then you can start with a count of 5. Maybe just put the mask on, count to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then reward the child immediately. Right? If the child does not keep it on, start it again. Gradually, you will see an increase in time from 5 counts. You can move on to 15 to 30. Gradually, then you can pair it with a favorite activity like going down just in the lift or something, and then you will see that things will improve. You can use a visual aid to to kind of explain to the child the need for wearing a mask and how to wear a mask. What all should be done if you don't. What can happen if you don't wear a mask? Gradually, it will happen, but the child will start wearing the mask at some point. Yes.
Yeah.
Carrying on to the next question, ma'am. Just the children become normal children. Is that possible?
Children become normal children.
Yes. Do these children become normal? I'm just
I do not know how you define normalcy. It's very
Absolutely.
difficult to define normalcy. I do not know if I'm normal or not, or everybody is normal. Normal is something which is defined by how most people behave. Is that what you mean by normal? I think your child, I do not know whether he's got autism or ID. If he's got autism, he's behaving normally like an autistic child. So whatever is normal for the autistic child is behaving that way. That's normal for him. He's got ID, so he's behaving doing those things which are normal for an ID person. Okay, so there are no criterion for normalcy. But yes, what you mean to say the child will have no problem at all in future. I will be telling you very honestly, your child has a condition which is not curable. It is only there for you to interact, intervenable. It's intervenable so that the impact of the condition is lessened. Okay, but if you don't intervene properly, some of the things that I've talked about, the common difficulties are going to get compounded, and there will be more and more problems which you will face. So you need to be interactive in a positive manner so that the child learns to behave normal in a normal pattern. Okay, how other people behave. So that is how you need to do it. There's nothing like that he will not be ID tomorrow or autistic tomorrow. There's nothing like that.
okay.
That's
One
a
question,
fact, but that's a fact.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I move to the next question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. My child has a habit of playing with the hanger. I presume it's the one to hang clothes, which is allowed otherwise, but is kept away while working. So while working, the child keeps asking for hanger. Is it avoiding work or something else, and how to manage this?
Just repeat the question once more, please.
Yeah, my child has a habit of playing with the hanger, which is allowed normally by the parents. Yes, but while working, the hanger is kept away, and at that time, the child keeps on asking for the hanger. So, is he just trying to avoid the work or something else, and how do I manage this?
Okay. See, I think this playing with the hanger must be his favorite activity, and also something that he likes it. His favorite activity. I think it's important for you to use this as a reward. Okay, use the hanger as a reward, hanger play, and let him do the task. Like I have told you already, whatever task he has to learn, you have to break the task into small steps. Now, when you teach step number 1, you allow the hanger play that time just for maybe a second or 2 seconds, and then you take it away. Remember, I have also worked with severe children who were severely autistic, and some of them had this kind of behavior. We taught them one concept called later, baad mein. Okay, that concept of baad mein is very important. Now the child has got that hanger. You take the hanger and you tell the child to put a block in the box, something which he can do. And he's asking for hanger. You say hanger baad mein. Okay, and you put one block, you give him the hanger, then you take it away and again say baad mein and let him put that one. Okay. He learns to do that, understand the concept of later. It's a very important concept because it's, across the board it is important. So once he learns that, later means it's not going to be given to me, it will be given to me. You have to understand that you have to give it to him. Okay, so he learns that later thing, then he learns to do 2 steps of the task. And you say later, hanger later, and you give it to him. Okay, the hanger is a reward, and he gets to get the reward only when he does the task, and he also learns to wait for that reward to come. Okay, you can link it to tokens later on, that he earns 2 tokens to get a hanger or 3 tokens to get a hanger. So instead of saying later, you can put him intervene with the token and the hanger comes. But later is also something which is socially very, very common for us to use. बाद में ये, तो बाद में का मतलब आप उसको देंगे जरूर बाद में. Okay, आप वो जो बाद में इतना लंबा भी नहीं होगा कि 5 मिनट बाद में. It has to be maybe 10 seconds and 20 seconds बाद में. Okay, for him to understand बाद में का मतलब वो चीज जाएगी नहीं, मेरे पास आएगी. तो वो वेट करना सीखता है. बाद में 20 seconds will become 1 minute or 2 minutes. That depends on you how he progresses. But it's a good thing, you can use it as a reward.
One very good question, ma'am. How to differentiate between a tantrum and a meltdown? And a meltdown.
Meltdown. Both are almost the same. You need to understand what is the trigger. Tantrum could be because of attention-seeking behavior. A meltdown could be because of sensory overload. Okay. So you need to understand what is triggering this. Once you understand that by observing the child properly, If you know the child is in a very crowded place, lot of noise, and he just rolls on the ground and starts crying, probably it's a meltdown because of sensory overload. Okay, so as a mother, I think most of us understand our children very well because we have had experience with them. We understand that. But when the child is doing this meltdown out of nothing and only because he wanted to have a laddu which was kept somewhere and you said, no, you've had enough, so he starts doing it, it is actually just a tantrum for getting that. So you need to understand when it is a meltdown for sensory overload and when it is to get some communication done. That is all about your observation and knowing your child. And then you can take a strategy which is helpful.
Okay, one question, ma'am. My son is 15 and his voice has changed since the last year. But now he's always using high pitch, which, he uses a high pitch when he talks. So how do I correct this habit of behavior?
High pitch.
Yeah.
I think this is more to do with a speech therapist. Maybe the speech therapist can help.
Yes.
And if the high pitch is not bothering you, I think just let it be. Maybe his pitch has changed because of his change in his growing up and the change has come. So if it's not bothering you, then let it be. Otherwise, you can ask some speech therapist to give you some online training there or with the child to cope with this thing, voice modulation.
Okay, ma'am. There, I think there's one question on Facebook that says that can these strategies be used for older children also? I mean,
Yes.
as they're watching it. So
sure, because what I have given today is just a scientific method of using behavior management strategy. It can, across the board, it can be used. There's nothing like very young children, but with older children, I also said keep their age in and their experience into account and respect them for that. Like, we had a mother who said, my child, when he goes to bed, he touches himself or he goes to the toilet and keeps washing himself for 5-10 times. Okay. Now, whether it was 5 times or 10 times, I'm not clear because there's a big difference between 5 and 10. And secondly, is that behavior harmful to that 18, 19-year-old? Just using washing himself in the bathroom. Is that behavior harmful to him? Is that behavior harmful to somebody else? Is it stopping him from learning something new? Nothing is happening there. He is in his bed and he goes to his attached bathroom and washes himself 3-4 times in the night. It bothers us. It's not bothering him. Remember also that sometimes being an autistic person or a person with intellectual disability, we have very few things, creative things in our mind. Lack of imagination is certain thing which is something that we all know happens. So they are not able to, if we were not feeling sleepy, perhaps we will go and open the TV and watch quietly, or we will read a book, or we go onto our phone and keep on watching some videos there quietly. We do many things in the night when they're not sleepy. But these are things which are not available to a young person with the autism or ID. So he does the next thing which he knows. Okay, so sometimes you need to respect certain things. Or the child goes and touches himself, put his hand in his pajama or something. I think just let it be at bedtime. Don't interfere all the time. Okay, so that respect is important.
Okay,
But
one question. I'm sorry, ma'am.
Yeah, go on.
Okay. Can these strategies be implemented on a child who's on mild psychotic medicines? Probably for behavior, I'm presuming.
So, I think it can be. There's no problem there as long as the child is not sleeping through the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the only thing which is there. Otherwise, they can be implemented all across. There's no problem there at all.
Yes. Okay, I think we shall. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, all of you. I see about quite a number of people.
Yes, 100 at all times. Probably a couple have dropped off now, but
thanks a lot for all of you for taking time off from your busy schedule and being here. I hope it was worth your while. But keep writing to Sopan, keep sending your issues, and we'll try to help you through Facebook or whichever means that we have. I think keep sending us emails also.
All our webinars are available on our Facebook page, even the ones which have happened and you've missed something. So most welcome to look at them, and we probably put up all the links on on our latest Facebook post also. And thank you, ma'am. And I think the questions which matter are all over. If there are more questions, you can of course write to us at supan+repeatedmail.com.
Yes. Is there anybody having any question? I don't
You
think
can
so.
open it out, Wilfred.
Yes, ma'am. You want me to unmute people?
No, it's okay. I think
It's okay. I think it's.
Yeah, I think thanks a lot then. Shobha, thanks a lot for moderating it.
My pleasure, ma'am, as always. There is one question, ma'am, if you don't mind answering it. Yeah.
Yeah.
My son is 15 and has started hitting my daughter, especially at night. What could be the reason? He gets all the attention he needs. He looks happy throughout the day, but in the night, his bad behavior starts. I think it's an important question.
In the night, what happens in the night?
In the night, the son is 15-year-old, and in the night, he starts hitting the daughter, right? Okay. Throughout the day, he gets a lot of attention and he's very happy. There's no problem. In the night, his behavior starts.
And who gives the attention? The daughter?
Not only that is not mentioned, but I presume the whole family reaches out and gives the attention. If the person is online, maybe you can just lift your hand and we'll unmute you.
Yeah. Who's asked this question?
1 minute.
Ma'am, I think so. Swapnali
More. Swapnali More. Swapnali More is online. Can you lift your hand? Then we can, it's Swapnali More. It's an important question. So last question. Keep it as a question.
Okay.
I asked her to unmute herself. I don't know if she is coming online or no, ma'am.
Okay. I think no. The thing is, it is possible that the child is not sleepy and the child wants to play with the sister or do something with the sister, and that's why he hits out. I don't know, because I'm not very clear about what role that the sister play that he has this kind of reaction.
Yeah, Swapnali, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, ma'am, actually it's not that he wants to play with her or something, because he hits her with his chin and it is like bruising her skin, her arms actually. So it is out of anger that I can make out, but I'm not able to find the reason. And this behavior has started around 2-3 months back. It is not always happening. Once in a week or twice in a week it happens, but then we just we don't say anything to him. We just ask him to sleep in separate bedroom. So I don't know. I really don't know what is the problem.
So if he sleeps somewhere else, then he's okay.
Yeah, then he will come in our bedroom and try to sleep with us. So he's totally confused.
Okay.
Like, I'm not able to make out.
No, but then see, yourself, you said that it happens once or twice.
In a week.
Once or twice. So it's not something which is happening throughout the night or many times in the night or every night. Okay.
Not at all.
No, that is one thing. And second thing is that maybe he likes the sensation of hitting something with his chin. Okay, that is possible. That maybe you can put maybe a thick bolster or a pillow or something between him and his sister. Or are they sharing a bed? Is the bed big?
No, they sleep on separate beds. They are not sharing the bed actually. And
but he goes over to her side.
Yes.
To her,
Yes.
Okay, and then hits her where?
On her arms exactly, with his chin.
With his chin. And what does she do?
Then she just comes to our bedroom. She's very small. She's very young. So she'll come to us.
Young. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, and does he understand other things that you tell him? Is he able to understand?
Yes, he definitely understands, and he knows that he is not supposed to hit his younger sister.
No, he knows that, but I think you need to write a small. Has he got autism?
Yes, he's autistic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you just make a small pictorial social story for him that at night we sleep in our bed, things like that. Make a pictorial thing, and we need to, if we get up and hit somebody, that person doesn't like it, or things like that. Pictorial thing. If I tend to get up in the night sometime and go over to my sister and disturb her with my nudge by hitting her by the neck. My sister doesn't like it, and my parent get upset. I will try to be in my bed, things like that, and with pictures, and let him go through the day, that social story, and see if it makes a difference to him.
Okay, I'll try that.
And the night that he doesn't do it, you need to also see that which night he didn't do it. You need to praise him for that.
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's all the questions are. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Dr. Lal. Yes, and we shall just sign off. Perfect. We can end the meeting.